everyone, welcome to Faces and Places in Fashion. Excited to have a fun jump into the world of costume design today. For my students in the class, I just want to refresh you with a couple reminders, the remote guidelines, just to go over those as always. If you use your raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen when you want to speak, I'll make sure to call on you in order that you do raise your hand. And if you have any immediate or technological questions or comments, please put it in the chat function and I'll follow along and answer as I can. Please turn your camera on if you speak and turn it on a little in advance of raising your hand so that you're ready to go when I call on you, and unmute only when you begin to speak. This class, as all classes, are being recorded. Reminder that your fashion event critiques were due today at 4:10. Hopefully they're all in. I'm really excited to read about what you guys have done and viewed, and can't wait to hear your commentary. Lecture prep questions need to be done by the last lecture of class on May 10th. You need to choose 2 different speakers to turn these in for. I've been getting some really great questions coming my way, and just for full credit, you need to make sure you ask at least one of those questions during class. Write down the answer that the speaker gives and send it back to me on the same email chain, ideally. Does anyone have any questions on this? Because I feel like there have been questions in the past. I want to make sure you're all clear. Great. And social media, I had put up a extra credit this week, but I did not get any responses. So I don't know how many of you guys are following along, but please make sure to follow me, and you can see there for any information that's happening about class, as well as fun tidbits and fun extra credit projects. Flash of our schedule, we have Katie Irish joining us today, who's a costume designer in television, film, and theater. Next week, we have Laura Wales Holiday joining us. She's a marketing consultant, currently working with Depop, but previously with Zola and Rent the Runway. Week 7, March 15th, is the day of your midterm. You'll have a week to complete this from 3/8 to 3/15. So there will be no class on the 15th. And on 3/22, Karen Sabag, designer for Karen Sabag New York. She's a bridal designer, will be joining class and taking us through her showroom. On March 29th, it's spring break, so no class that week. And then April 5th, Zeta Musa, who's a design director for Betsy Johnson Kids at GW Industries, will be joining us. April 12th, Dimitri Williams, who's founder and CEO of Mitra, but also a designer at Helm & Lang, will be joining us. She is relatively new in launching her own business, so we'll talk to you guys about that juggle that goes on when you're still working for another company, but trying to get your own off the ground. April 19th will be Bijou Abiola, who is Director of Consumer Insights and Strategy at L'Oreal. And April 26th, Alana Botez is another costume designer who's joining us, but she is more in the theater and opera and dance realm, which gives a different perspective. I'm excited to have her in as well. On May 3rd, Rachel Landy, who's Vice President of Global Merchandising at Kate Spade, will be joining us. And last but not least, May 10th, we'll have a Fashion Services Network panel of some industry professionals who support the fashion industry. Does anyone have a question about the schedule? Well, with that, I want to kick off our class today with Joshua Burns. Hi, Josh. Thanks for joining.
Hi. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. So Josh is a facilitator instructor for FIT's Continuing and Professional Studies program, and in particular, wants to talk with you guys about the Broadway film and television wardrobe and costume construction class that is about to begin. Mm-hmm. Josh, I don't know if you want to tell them a little bit about your background and then also about the background of the course. That might be
of course
better than coming from me.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me interrupt briefly. So my name is Joshua Burns, and I have a BFA and an MFA from the University of Virginia. And I've been here in New York for 11 years working on Broadway, film, television, Metropolitan Opera, Radio City. You sort of forget, like after a point, how much you worked on. So I'm the new facilitator. Well, I'm the facilitator. I was brought on a few years ago, but we're finally now launching the new program. It's called the Costume Design and Wardrobe Technician Program. And here we're going to hear from Broadway actors, designers, wardrobe supervisors, wardrobe staff, lots of departments that are part of creating a design for a show and then implementing it once it goes into production. So what we're trying to do is we're setting up the program so that it starts from the costume design the whole process of reading the script and doing research, and then when it starts to be handed off to the wardrobe department, and then what paperwork they need from the costume designer, what paperwork they create in order to do their job. So it's going to give you all the necessary paperwork for current and past Broadway productions that were actually used. We're then finally going to end it with resumes that are specific to the industry, because a lot of people don't realize that resumes for theater and for the entertainment industry are very different than a regular business resume. So we really give you the skill sets and the documents you need in order to do that, to allow you the ability to be more ready to get a job in the industry. We're going to talk about COVID. Things are changing so rapidly, and I think that's the best time to start teaching this, is because once we go back to the entertainment industry, things are going to change. So we need to talk about what those changes may be. So we're going to have people come in to talk about that. We're going to have people from the Wardrobe Union come and speak about that. So finally, because this is done remotely, which is a brand new experience for us, we've made sure that we've taken the time and the care in ensuring that everyone who takes the course or the program via online, you're able to get the same hands-on experience, all the same paperwork as you would if you were taking the class in person, which we're excited to start teaching. It's a first for us. And once we go back to school, it'll be the same sort of experience you're going to get online. So it starts March 15th and ends May 15th, and it's $2,200. It's a 72-hour program. We meet every Friday and Saturday. And the deadline to sign up is February 11th. So you can register online on the FIT website. It's in their certificate programs.
Did you mean March 11th?
Did I say February? I meant March.
Yes. Okay.
It's like when you're not working anymore, like
what is time anyway?
What day it is.
Yeah.
So you can register on the FIT certificate program website and just click on the costume design and wardrobe technician certificate program website, and you can sign up there. And I did forget to mention, yeah.
I can put your link to sign up in the chat.
That is wonderful.
Anyone here is interested. Find it here.
And the other thing we're going to talk about is how to design and have a more environmentally friendly choices you can make in order to use some of the resources that are already made, and ways in which you can use those and way in which you can then donate them to other places. It's such an important thing right now, especially with our environment, where we really need to take better care of our world. And it's like,
couldn't agree more, yeah.
And the three teachers who are going to be part of the program, we have over 50 years worth of experience in film, television, Broadway,
Wow.
the music industry. So we're very excited to start having people in. So if you're interested, anyone who else is who is interested, we would be more than happy to talk to you. You can email us. The email address is also on the link. And I really appreciate your time.
Great, thank you.
No, thank
you. This is the third semester that I'm having costume designers into this course, and I think it's become quite apparent how little of that there actually is at FIT to learn more about. There's not a concentration. There are not very many courses, so it's really exciting that this is happening, and I think there's going to be a lot of interest.
I hope so. And the other thing is, when I went to school, I have 2 degrees. I had no idea there was a wardrobe certificate or a wardrobe program. I had no idea that you could go and get a job in wardrobe and actually make a great living doing it. It's like these are the things I learned once I moved to New York. And so I want to give people a head start on that so that you know that it's an option. And you can even work your way out of wardrobe up into the costume design field. That's a great part of what we do because we work so directly with the costume design department. So it's a great way to get your foot in the door.
Great. Well, thank you, Josh.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So like I said, email me if you have any questions.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. So you guys, I'd love to introduce you guys to Katie Irish, who's a costume designer joining us. She's based here in New York City. She's best known for her work on the award-winning FX series, The Americans. She began as a shopper for the first season of the show, becoming assistant designer for seasons 2 and 3, and then took the helm as designer for seasons 4 through 6. The final season of The Americans took home the Best Drama Awards for both the Emmys and the Critics' Choice Awards. Prior to her work on The Americans, Irish designed the indie features The Widowers and Landing Up, co-designed the season 10 semifinals and finale of NBC's America's Got Talent, shopped for HBO's Deadwood, and served as the New York design assistant for The Muppets Wizard of Oz. She has also designed numerous commercials, short films, and music videos. Earlier in her career, she worked extensively as an associate designer on Broadway, where favorites included Jesus Christ Superstar, Godspell, Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark, Jerusalem, Fences, Promises, The Seagull, Is He Dead, and Shrek. Originally from Memphis, Katie is an alum of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts with an MFA in design for stage and film. She is currently working on a new project for Netflix. Thank you for joining us, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so happy to have you here. So please just start off by telling us a little bit more about your career path and how you got started and how you got to where you are now.
There is no one way to get into this career is the first thing I should say. Evidenced by the fact when I started college, I thought I was going to be a research biologist. So you can definitely change course. I had done theater for a lot of my childhood, but I never knew that a costume designer was actually a job that you could get paid for and make a career out of. And so when I was in college, I was in a BA program. And so we all had to direct, we all had to do design courses. And I didn't have a design course until my junior year in college. And when I did, I had an amazing mentor and professor who's still a dear friend. And I just kind of had a eureka moment that this is what I needed to be doing with my life. And it all just made sense to me.
That's great.
After that, I just kind of crammed as much in as I could in the last year and a half. And as you said, I went to NYU for graduate school and then kind of jumped out and just started working as much as possible.
Did you go directly from undergrad to graduate?
No, I had a year in between. Again, being in the right place at the right time. My mentor from undergrad took another position at another university right after I graduated. And so my alma mater was looking for someone to be the resident designer for a year and to run the costume shop. And lucky them, they had someone who had just graduated who was a designer and had worked in the costume shop. So I had this weird kind of mix of professional and academia for a year, which was amazingly nurturing and wonderful. And it was during that year that I really figured out I needed to go to graduate school and applied.
Great, cool. And did you go back to NYU for your graduate school?
I went to the University of Tulsa in Tulsa, Oklahoma for undergrad, and I went to NYU for graduate school.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry.
No problem.
And how did you find the experience of getting an MFA?
It was grueling. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But absolutely worth it for me. The connections and the people and the friends that I have made have lasted me all of this time. I graduated 16 years ago this May. And those are the people that when you're first starting out help you get jobs because if they're working on something and someone calls them and they say, you know what, I can't do that, but you know what, let me give you this number and call her, she's free. And so that's how you get jobs. And those are the people that understand when you're having an awful day and you're trying to find this one specific thing and no shops have it and you're scared to go back and tell people that you can't find it.
Yeah, it's very important to have a support system. I feel like no matter what path you end up taking, it's good to have that home base.
Absolutely.
So when you graduated from your MFA, how did you get your first job in the industry?
My first job actually came from a former professor, Carrie Robbins, who had taught my second year class at NYU, was designing White Christmas. And there were 3 companies of it. It was going to be in San Francisco, LA, and Boston. It was not a tour, wow. It was 3 separate companies, and they all opened within 2 weeks of each other. And
oh, wow.
So we had a very large team because there were basically, the first team was going to open the first and the third, and then part of us would also go from the first to the LA. So I started as a shopper for that show and then worked my way up to an assistant designer for the San Francisco and the LA companies.
Oh, that's great. Can you tell us I think that a shopper is an entry-level job usually in costume design.
That depends on if you're talking about film or theater.
Okay.
You
want to tell us about both?
Of course. It is in theater. It is a non-union job, and it's a shopper in theater. You will be shopping everything from gorgeous silk fabrics to underwear and socks in obscene numbers. And in film and TV, though, a shopper is a union position, and the entry level is a production assistant in the costume department.
Okay. And what does that role look like?
That role, there are a couple of different ways that costume shops use production assistants. The main role is returns. You are the person that gets to go through all of the receipts and pack everything up that's not being used and go and return it.
Oh, wow.
It's such an important job. PAs, I mean, we seriously could not do our work without PAs. Oftentimes there's one PA that just drives around and lets the shoppers hop out and they go in, and then the shoppers come and dump all of the shopping bags into the van. We always have a minivan. And so that way they are not burdened with trying to, carry everything as they're going and running and trying to grab what all they need.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there is what's called a paperwork PA. And that position helps the coordinator with all of the paperwork. They're the people that go through and make sure that all of the receipts are written up properly. So that way, should we need to return something, you can look and figure out what receipt it's on. That they track all of the P-card information, and they're the ones that help with all of the accounting for which we have to justify every week.
Yeah. So I'm always struck by how much of budgeting goes into the role of a costume designer. But I don't know if you could talk to the students a little bit about the path when you start off on a film track. You start off kind of in the PA role. What are the steps that you kind of move through as you go up the ranks?
Sure. Just as a side note, when Joshua said that he's offering all of the paperwork, that is the first time I've ever heard of a course that offers it. And that's amazing because there's stupid amount of paperwork that you end up doing.
I can imagine.
Okay, sorry. So back to your question. Yes. Yeah. The production assistants are the entry-level position. And then from there, the next step is the costume coordinator. And this is the person who runs the costume shop. They are in charge of everything from scheduling fittings to making sure everybody gets lunch, to doing all of the accounting, all of the bookkeeping, and interfacing with the accounting department. They're the shop managers. It's an extremely important role, and they can honestly make or break an entire production. From there, the costume coordinators sometimes are in the union. Local 829 in New York. And sometimes they are not. It depends on what production you're on as to if it's a union job or not. From there, the next stop is Shopper, and that is a union position, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is hitting the streets for 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, trying to find everything. And sometimes, depending on the show, that's fabric for custom builds, or it's, you know, going out and shopping the perfect vintage skirt to fit someone, you know, and all things in between.
Yeah.
From there, you get into assistant designer territory. And here, depending on how big your show is, you can have one assistant designer, or there can be multiple assistant designers with different things, different responsibilities. Traditionally, the way I use an assistant designer is I work with them on all of the budgeting. They are in charge of the background. So any kind of pre-fits that we do for background, any kind of specialty things we need, they're in charge of all of that. They are the ones who go to set for the background call. And then when there's a final lineup, they're the ones who photograph it and send it to me. So that way I can take a look. They are also the ones who oversee the shopping. So the assistant and I will have a conversation about what needs to happen and what the schedule is. And then the assistant designer actually gives out the shopping lists often and says, like, so this is what you're doing today, this is what you're doing.
Yeah.
He or she is, again, it's having a fantastic assistant designer can make or break your production. And then there's the costume designer, which is what I do. And working alongside of us is the wardrobe department, which is an entirely different department, but we all work together.
Hand in glove.
Exactly. I don't know, do you guys all know the difference between a costume and a wardrobe department? It's totally okay if the answer is no, because a lot of people I work with in the film and TV industry don't know either.
I do not.
Okay. Costume department is everything that happens from when we get the script through the conceptual ideas of who the characters are, through the drawings, through the fabrication and fittings and alterations to the clothing fitting. That is all costumes. Wardrobe is when we hand it over to the people who are in charge of making sure it gets on set on the right actor for the correct scene. So wardrobe are the people that look at the schedule and see that we're shooting this scene today with these characters, and these are the costumes that they need to wear. They're the ones for making sure if it's supposed to be bloody, that they're wearing the bloody one, and all of the continuity.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so when the costume department hands it off to wardrobe, we were saying, like, does the costume department still have any say in how the wardrobe presents it?
Oh, absolutely.
Continuity. Yeah.
Absolutely. When I am packing up clothes to go, the wardrobe supervisor gives me garment bags, and they each have an oak tag on it. And it has the character name, the actor name, the scene number, and usually a little brief description of what's happening in the scene. And so I pull all the clothes that the characters are wearing, everything, all the jewelry, if there's underwear that we see on camera, underwear, all of that. And I have a Post-it note system that I then put on. And I write notes on the Post-it note, like top button worn open, sleeves rolled up, in scene 17, you know, untucked shirt, things like that. And so it's the wardrobe supervisor and the wardrobe team's responsibility then for the actor to wear it in the way that I have presented it to them. I also go to set whenever we have a new costume or a new character being established to make sure, again, that everybody is happy and they are wearing it the way they're supposed to. And after we've rolled one take, then it's continuity and they can't change it.
Thank you.
Locked in.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I just mentioned a little bit about budgeting. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about how that goes into your role and kind of how it kicks off and
sure
from there.
There is a fantastic program that we use called Sync on Set. And what it does is you load the PDF of your script into it, and it breaks down your script by continuity days and by characters.
Oh, wow.
So then it can immediately tell you in about 3 minutes how many looks you have per episode or per, per film, as well as, what characters are in each scene. And it's an amazing time-saving program.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And so then based on that, I go through and I use an Excel spreadsheet, and I do it in a way that is more theater-based because that was my training. And so I do a line item budget. And again, I don't always know exactly what each character is wearing in each scene. But if I read a scene and I know that this character is outside, I know I'm going to put in for a coat, a hat, gloves, a scarf, and another pair of socks for that person, in addition to a shirt, a sweater, a belt, all of those kind of things. And so then I start, and I have a formula now because I've been doing it long enough that I know about what a shirt's going to cost. I know about what, the pair of pants is going to cost, and I start plugging in numbers. Then you have to take into account if there are multiples needed. Are we doing something that requires a stunt sequence? So the standard number is 4 of anything that could possibly get dirty, damaged, etc. Because you want to have 1 that stays clean and is called the hero, and you want to have 3 that you can burn or go through and dirty up and have a fresh one to start again. So you have 4 of everything for the stunt sequence for the actor, but then if the actor has a stunt double, you have to have 4 of everything for the stunt double as well. I have found that by doing line item budgets, I tend to get the money that I need more easily because it's written in a language that accounting people understand. It's a spreadsheet. It's got formulas. They can see it. It's all laid out. And so if I turn in a budget and people are like, oh my God, this is a lot of money. I was like, okay, well, there's one scene where we have 20 background uniforms. The uniforms are $500 a pop to rent. So that's an easy place to cut some money if you want. Do we really need 20, or can we do it with 10? And then all of a sudden 10 is just fine to make that scene work. And so it's speaking their language, and it is having people understand why it costs what it costs to do our job.
When I've had other costume designers on before, they say, it is a challenge because I think when you work for a company, and this wouldn't be a designer's job, we're speaking to mostly designers in this class, but when you work for a company and you're a buyer or something and you say, hey, I need more money because XYZ, sure, there's a total pie, but it's all to make money and grow it. When you're in costume design, if you go to your director and say, I need more money, or I'm going over budget, or whatever, it's going to get pulled from somewhere else. It's not just, or they're going to have to go out and fundraise, I guess, and get a little bit more money, but it's not as easy as just saying, okay, sure, you can be a little bit over on your plan because
sometimes
the money,
especially in TV, sometimes they'll look at an episode, and traditionally the first 2 episodes of a season and the last 2 episodes of a season are going to be your most heavy budgeting, because that's when all the action takes place. That's when you're starting getting people back into the season, and that's where you're wrapping up to the cliffhanger. So oftentimes they expect those budgets to be heavier. Whereas in the middle, there might be an episode it's what we call a bottle episode. It means there are only characters that are known and established. There's nothing special happening. There are no sequences, and it's like 2 days. So they're not changing clothes all the time. And those are going to be less. And so a lot of times they will say like, okay, well, if episode 5 is going to be 10,000 over or under, then of course you can take, that and move it here.
Did you find it challenging to kind of be doing I mean, you're obviously a creative person. It sounds like a little numbers heavy. Was that hard to get used to?
It's honestly part of what I was originally hired as an assistant for, is that number heavy thing. Because I came to the idea of costume design fairly late as far as, art training. I had no art class since elementary school. So I certainly was not being hired as a sketch artist for anybody, especially when I was first starting. So the fact that I could do all of the spreadsheet and all of the budgeting and do any kind in theater, we didn't use sync on set. So do the script breakdowns and the plots and all of that kind of thing. These are things that are very useful and valuable and not fun at all to do. And so having someone that you know can do them and that you trust to do them is important.
Yeah, well, that's great. So tell us about what a typical week would look for you on a project pre-COVID.
Yes, pre-COVID. Traditionally, in television, you are prepping one episode while you're shooting one episode at the same time. Sometimes it's becoming more and more common. We do a crazy thing called crossboarding, which means you are shooting 2 episodes together.
Oh, wow.
And it helps with actors and locations and all of that kind of thing, but it makes our life much more difficult. And so in that case, then you are prepping 2 episodes and shooting 2 episodes at the same time. So you have 4 episodes in your head. So oftentimes, a traditional week, if I am starting on one of these new episodes, there's a series of meetings. The first meeting is just the introduction meeting, which is where you meet the director and you do a script page by page turn through with usually all the department heads. And so that's where you start to bring up any kind of ideas that you might have for the entire show there, anything that might affect cross departments. I don't know if anyone saw The Americans, but there was a necklace in season 6 that held a cyanide pill. And so traditionally props would have handled that because it was a plot device. But I was like, no, we'll take that. I've got it. We'll take care of it. You just let me know how big the pill is that we need to hide. And so anything like that, that's a cross-departmental sharing, you start to bring up there.
Yeah.
Then we have a costume meeting, which is another turn-by-turn script thing where you go through and you ask all the questions. What time of day is it? How is there anything that you, the director, want to convey in this scene? Is there anything special? If we have new characters, what do you want me to know about them? Then I also sit in often on hair and makeup meetings and sometimes prop meetings if it's crossing over. And then we also have a production meeting, usually the day before we start shooting. And so again, that's going page by page or scene by scene, and talking about anything that everybody needs to know, anything that has come up, shooting order, the sequence that we're doing things in. Scattered in between all of these meetings, I'm doing fittings and research and getting approvals on clothes that we have fit, and going to set to establish costumes and characters as we are doing it.
Yeah. Wow. What types of people do you come across in your path? Are there a lot of people like you that kind of come from a more educational approach to costume design, or do you come across people that are actually from the industry, from the fashion industry, or is it a mix?
It's a total mix. Like I said, there's no one path into costume design. I mean, I know someone who was formerly an architect who's now a costume designer.
Oh, wow.
And she cannot sew, but she thinks of fabric 3-dimensionally because of her training as an architect. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So no, yes, there are people who absolutely were the theater kids growing up and know and love it and got into it and have been doing it all the time. There are people that came in through fashion, and I think fashion is so much harder. You guys have to create stories for all of your designs and your collections. I have the story already. I just have to outfit it. And so, there's a whole mix of people that are costume designers.
Yeah, cool. When a project ends, how do you typically find the next project?
I have an agent. And so I call my agent, and they obviously know when a project is ending. But you scour all of the people that and the connections and what are they going on to next, and calling people pre-COVID, just saying, hey, you want to meet for coffee? We haven't seen in a little while, and catch up. Just remind people that you exist and you're available.
Yeah. So networking is huge.
It is. It always
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's that way for any industry. I don't think ours is special in that way.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So obviously this year's been it's been tough for everyone, but I think it's been very tough on theater and film. Can you talk to us a little bit about what happened, starting last March to now, and what's going on in the film world?
This time last March, I was in Tel Aviv shooting on a show. We had shot half of the show takes place in New York, and the other half takes place in Israel.
Oh, wow.
And we had about a month left of shooting. And I was on an overnight shoot on March 11th. And Tel Aviv is 7 hours ahead. And so I was on set at 2 a.m. when the president gave his speech about closing the borders.
Oh, my gosh.
And then when I got up the next morning, our production had been canceled, and we were all flying home 2 days later. So I was on an international flight on March 14th, coming back to New York, and having no idea, what you were going to find when you came back to New York. And since then, it has been very slow, as I'm sure most of you know. Things have started back. I actually have been working remotely for the last 2 months because they are shooting. They're finishing the show right now. In fact, today is our last day on set. And
oh, yay.
I know, it's very exciting.
Only took a year.
Exactly. And so it's been different because I thankfully have the same crew that I had when I was there last year, which it's amazing for, having worked with them. They know the show, they know me, they know what we're going for, what the goals stylistically are. And we were very close to completion. And so I didn't have too many things left that still required costume fittings. But I've been doing, Google Meet costume fittings and getting very close to the camera, being like, can you turn around? And that's certainly letting up a serious control in just, having to take the word of the person who's in the room when you're not.
Yeah.
Been doing everything with WhatsApp and Google Meet recently.
So who actually is going to set?
My wardrobe supervisor and my Israeli assistant designer are on the project. And so, as well as the costume crew, my costumers are the same, my background costumer is the same. And so, all of the different text messages at various times of day and night about, this look and this approval and, all of the establishing shots you've got. And so they're going, and we talk often, and sometimes I'm up at bizarre hours of the night to talk to people.
Well, it is nice. I feel like television has kept going a little bit more than theater, which is still dark, and who knows when that will change. So it's nice that that's going, even if it's weird.
It is. No, it's fantastic. And I think, what all have we been doing for the last year but sitting and binge watching things? So,
yeah, totally. I know.
Everybody needed new content.
Totally.
And I think that they have been good in figuring out ways to get people tested at good intervals and provide with the PPE and make safe work environments.
That's great. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, I was thinking that when I was watching the Golden Globes last night. I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen so many things that are coming up, because what else have I done this year? Of course.
I had the same conversation with my husband. I was like, I actually have seen more this year than I think in a while. And he's like, well, because we sit and watch them on our couch whenever. And I was like, exactly. Yeah. I'm on set trying to figure out, when I'm going to get to the movies to go see that.
Yeah, totally. What's been your favorite project that you've worked on?
That's really hard because it's like being asked to pick your favorite child.
Maybe.
They're all different. The Americans holds a special, dear place in my heart because it's the first show that I designed as the costume designer in my own right for television. I also had a lot of just like personal growth on that show, and so that is a very, very special one to me. It also professionally gave a lot of challenges in that it was period and they were spies. So there were disguises every week and there were stunt sequences. And so it was really rich material, both in story and in challenges for a costume designer.
Yeah, that's great. And so you just mentioned to us that obviously your latest project, you're split between Tel Aviv and New York City. What other places have you traveled to for costume design?
I've worked in Puerto Rico. I've worked in a lot of different places in the United States. I've worked a lot in California and San Francisco. I've worked in Philadelphia and Atlanta and Memphis. And you can end up in a lot of different places. My agent actually texted me the other day asking about going to New Zealand because evidently that's where they're going to be shooting a lot of things now because they don't.
Very safe there.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I'm surprised New Zealand's up for that, but that's good.
Well, they have the whole film infrastructure from all of the Lord of the Rings movies. So
yeah,
it's interesting though, because it's, these are not stories that necessarily have anything to do with New Zealand. It's a very safe place to be shooting right now.
Totally. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you find that a lot of people are based out of New York, even despite all the travel? Or
I do. I know everyone, it's interesting because everyone calls it Hollywood, but in the last 5 years, more TV shows were shot in New York than in LA.
Oh, wow.
And so we've had a lot of growth. I feel like people who are based in New York actually work in and around New York. Sure, they go to Boston or Philadelphia sometimes, but it's kind of more settled in and around New York. The people I know that work in LA rarely actually work in LA. They're the ones that end up going to set in Montana or Nevada or New Zealand, or they're the ones that are traveling a lot more, it seems.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So, I mean, one of the things I've been focusing on a lot this year is just because I'm so tied down to people who are based solely in New York, and I don't get to hear very much about different cities, but wondering if you have any, personalities of the cities that you've worked in, LA, maybe, for example, compared to New York, and kind of how they compare for students who may be thinking about going to the West Coast.
I mean, who doesn't love LA in February and March? That's, I always would joke.
It's hard to be here right now. That's true.
I know. I keep looking out at the snow and I'm like, it's 50 degrees. Why is the snow still here? But no, it's both. I mean, both places are fantastic. Atlanta has a ton of shooting happening right now as well. It's kind of all started with Walking Dead, and Tyler Perry built his studio there, and everybody, it's huge now. And so they're all really great places to work. It's mostly, I think, about where you want to live when you're not working. It's not necessarily that one city is better for work or not. It's about when you're not working, where do you want to be?
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good advice. Who's the most interesting person you've met so far for work?
I would say one of the most interesting people is Margot Martindale, who is a character actor who I'm sure people are like, I guarantee you, if you Google her, you will go, oh, her. But she just has a vast history with theater and with New York and with film and TV. And she's just funny as hell. She's a joy. She's absolutely a pleasure to work with and just to laugh with. And she's definitely one of the people that if you're sitting in the 15-pass van riding to set, she's got a story, and it's always a really funny and interesting one.
Very cool. What do you think is an important? Oh, Jack, did you say something?
I was going to say, I know her from BoJack Horseman, where she plays.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, character actress Margot Martindale.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, what do you feel like is an important quality for someone to possess in this field?
Detail oriented.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I changed over from theater to film and television is, to me, a character is the sum of all the small things. It's the choice of the small earring coupled with, if there's a little bit of lace at the edge of a collar, coupled with, does someone have a small tattoo that's right there, but it's not, a whole neck tattoo, but they just have a little star back there. These are small things that begin to tell you something about this character and their inner life. And in theater, your first row may see it. It depends on how big your theater is. But I guarantee you that someone 150 feet from the stage is not going to see that. In film and television, I know you're going to see it because so much of it is shot from here up. So you're going to see all of the stuff right here. And so to me, it's exciting. So the things that I was already doing with an actor, talking about little choices that, sometimes would just be between me and the actor because I knew the audience would never actually be able to see them, now are something that can contribute to an audience's idea of this character and of the story.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Anna, did you have a question?
Yeah, also going off of that detail orientation, when you had to, say, work with period costume design, especially like you working on the 80s and dealing with like the Americans, where did that kind of like come naturally with you working in theater and maybe using period then, or is that more difficult to work in period clothing?
I love period clothing, and I love all periods, even the ones that are ugly, because the 80s gets a bad rap a lot of the time. And don't get me wrong, there are a ton of atrocious clothes from the 80s, but the late 90s aren't looking so good either right now. So, but yes, theater, doing research for theater taught me a lot about how to start looking for things and how you would look for things not only just in a magazine, which obviously is the ideal way that people want to be presented, and the way that the company wants you to wear the clothing or the way they would style you, but it also is how it's an idealized version. Working in theater often taught me, go to old photographs. Thank you to everyone who have put your grandmother's photographs online and that you can search through on Tumblr, on Pinterest, on Instagram. Going through and finding old yearbooks. Classmates.com is fantastic for looking through everybody's old yearbooks. And so you can see like, okay, this is how Esprit wanted you to wear the sweatshirt. This is how the kid in the middle of the country in 7th grade in 1984 was actually wearing it. And so that was really great. The other thing that theater really helped with is, in theater, you have to have something that is going to last for 8 shows a week. I don't care how fantastic a condition something is going to be in, it's not going to last for 8 shows a week if it is vintage, usually. There are some exceptions to that. Jeans are, one of the exceptions, but traditionally it's not going to last. So knowing to go and source something and then have the pattern copied, look at it, look at how it's stitched, look at the detailing, look at the fabrication, the fabric choices, the trim. This was especially useful because in film and TV, like on The Americans, I could use vintage clothing. It didn't have to last for 8 shows a week. But for stunt sequences, I certainly wasn't going to find 8 of a silk jumpsuit. So I was going to need to fabricate it. So you would go, and again, it would be the same process as we did in theater. You go find the original one that you really liked and want to take the pattern off of, and then you multiply it and you have it made.
Interesting. Yeah, I never really thought about of course you think about clothing, say in like the 1600s or things like that of course you have to make that by hand because all of that's very old. But like when it comes to like, oh, I'm making a show in the 80s, cool, I can just go to a vintage shop and find everything and then have that be it. But it's very interesting to how much money goes into making new old clothes. So
Yes. Well, and then you make them new, and then you have to distress them so they don't look brand new unless the character is meant to walk into a shop and go, oh, I'm going to, and try that on. Because that's the other problem is, you want the clothes to look like they've been in people's closets. You don't want the shoes to be unmarked on the bottoms when they put their feet up on the desk. So
Right,
these are the things that, again, you watch, and as an audience member, you might not immediately notice, but I firmly believe it contributes to your overall feeling of the show, and if it feels real to you, and if you're invested in the character and the stories.
Yeah, actually, one of the speakers I've had on in the past said that there are oftentimes movies where the costumes are just so bad, and you can't pinpoint why you don't like the movie, but costume designers know it's because the costumes are terrible. They're not saying what they need to say.
And Lord knows there's tons of times it's not the designer's fault. There's a design by committee, or producer who's in charge of your costume budget really hates the color green, and so you can't use any green in the show, or there are all kinds of things, that are silly. But that sometimes end up ruling your life. Try not to hold it against the costume designer always.
Yeah.
But also, again, I do feel that all these things add up and make a difference in how you perceive a piece.
Yeah, for sure. Great. I have another question here from Amber.
Hi, can you all see and hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, hi. I want to say thank you for coming on, because I have a huge passion for costume design. I started out sewing through cosplay for anime conventions, and I made a steampunk costume and all that stuff. So that's why I got into sewing, and then I couldn't find a costume design program. So here I am at FIT, but I love it because it teaches you the basics and the all the stuff with sewing, and I love it so much. But my question for you is, yeah, I suddenly forgot. But when designing costumes for film and theater, oh, my connection?
You're good.
Oh, sorry, this just blacked out. Okay, so sorry, yeah, Blackboard does that. But for film and theater, when designing a costume, how do you balance out, especially for period costumes, when you're how do I say it? When you're designing something for a certain time period and you're supposed to make it historically accurate, how do you balance out what you as a designer, not really a designer, but as a creative person, want in a costume, and put your own twist on it and maybe make it a little more modern, a little different, and how do you balance out the historical accuracy of it? How do you do it personally?
It's very tricky, because if anybody is a fan of Outlander, the threads on Reddit about how accurate or not accurate the costumes are. The whole thing about Bridgerton, about the period, it's the right silhouette, but the fabrics, the color, so yes. For me, the first thing I look at is the story, because as the costume designer, I serve the story. So what choices am I going to do to help that? Going back to The Americans, it was a very serious show. There were some funny things that happened in it, but at no point did I ever want the costumes to make anybody go, what is she wearing? Unless it was meant to be a disguise and was meant to be, a red herring and pull your attention over here while something else is happening. So you begin to look at the research that is going to serve the purpose your character is doing. What are they doing in the scene? What is their overall arc? What do they need? From there, then, and you're looking at the research, you have to look at it with a modern eye, because you and I may know that this is for example, the hair in the 1840s is really atrocious by modern standards. It just is. It's not flattering. No one is going to look at it and go, oh yeah, she looks great. So you have to figure out where the balance is for you between knowing that your audience is going to watch this, and this is your ingenue. This is the woman that the audience needs to feel empathetic with. So her hair can't be something that they're going to look at and go, oh, I'm not sure about that. So it's a kind of give and take. And then it's about exploring and figuring out for you and your production, where the line is. Where can you all embrace some good period ugliness, as I like to call it, or where is it going to be distracting, either for the audience or the story? And then, just kind of feel it out from there.
All right, yeah, thank you so much. And I also had like a little bit of a follow-up question. I was just wondering, it's like a short question, but I was wondering if you had any advice for someone who is like an aspiring costume designer, and they're like I have really decent sewing skills, but I'm not good at drawing. And yeah, so like usually whenever I would like design something, whether it's a small accessory or like I made a steampunk costume once, and I feel like I couldn't really put it down on paper. I just thought of the colors in my head and then I made it. So I guess like I know like in fashion design, you usually have a portfolio which has all your sketches and stuff. And I want to know how like the whole process for costume design differs a little from that, because I know that like there's like so many different aspects of what roles people play. I just want a little bit of insight on that.
Sure. First off, I could not draw to save my life when I came into graduate school. I feel like my drawing skills are better now. I work on them. Right. I would like to say I work on them daily, but I have 2 small kids, so that doesn't happen. But I am continually trying to improve them. The most important thing is to be able to convey your idea on paper in whatever way you can. I do firmly believe in visual research, especially when you're dealing with the compressed time frame of television, because if I say a black t-shirt and jeans, we could be thinking of a black t-shirt from Barney's and a pair of $400 designer jeans. We could be thinking of a black t-shirt from Kmart and some Old Navy jeans. Or we could be thinking of kind of, a rock and roll black t-shirt with the sleeves cut off and your boyfriend's 501s that you've picked up off the floor. Now, those are all black t-shirts and jeans, but those are 3 very different people wearing them. And so this is why I really believe that visuals are important. Before I was comfortable showing people my drawings, I did a lot of collage. I know Photoshop, and so in between, putting together what I would call like Franken sketches, where you take something from one place and you put it over here.
Oh, yeah.
Anything to get an accurate representation of what I meant. So if I found a piece of research that was great, but the color wasn't right, scan it in, put it into Photoshop, change the color, paint on top of it. Whatever I could do, so that way when I got into a fitting, people weren't like, oh, that's not what I was thinking you meant. You never want to have people look at you surprised when they're looking at fitting photos because you want to already have it discussed, agreed upon. You want them to be like, yes, okay, yep, that's looking good. That's what we wanted. And so, like I said, I did a ton of collage. And honestly, at the pace for television, I rarely have time to sketch everything. Usually the only things I sketch these days are things that I'm having built. And then they're mostly technical drawings for the tailors who are building things. It is not the pretty rendering that you're going to put up on Instagram or someone's going to frame and put into their hallway. It's the technical. It's like the lapel should be 3 inches wide and then 2 inches down. It needs to narrow. Like it's all of that kind of detail stuff. So mostly I use visuals as far as like inspiration boards. And again, I do it for modern shows. I do it for period shows. A man who wears a suit from Macy's that is not tailored specifically to him is going to look very different than the same man wearing a suit from Saks Fifth Avenue that he has had actually tailored to him.
All right, thank you so much.
Of course.
Great. The next question I see here is from Jennifer.
Hi.
Hi.
My question kind of piggybacks off of what Amber was talking about when venturing into looking for a job in the costume design field.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say would be something to keep in mind in regards not only to your portfolio, but also when applying for a job, and if there's any like small niches within costume design?
If you're talking about applying for a position in film and TV specifically, okay, The biggest thing is you've got to be a PA first, usually. There are exceptions, but usually if you're just starting out, if you're a PA, the most important qualities in a PA: show up on time. And by on time, I mean be there 5 minutes early, and always be busy. Like if you finish a task, go and ask the coordinator, okay, hey, I'm done with that. What do you need me to do next? I guarantee you, you will get hired again and again and again. If it's as easy as doing those two things. Because if you do those two things, then people will notice you and will notice the work that you're doing. And from there, you'll be able to say like, hey, you know what, I'm interested in being on set. And the costume designer or the assistant or anybody can be like, okay, great, we'll figure out a day to get you up to come to set. Or, you know, how does background work? Whenever I am working in a traditional way, not this crazy remote way, I always try and bring my PAs to set, or to just so they have a better understanding. It's a little like the bridge between school and the professional world, in that being a PA, you really learn the hierarchy. You learn how the whole costume department works, but you also learn how production works. What role does a second AD do? What does a second do? Why is it that silly name? Like, it's you learning all of that stuff, in addition to doing the hard work of all of the paperwork and the returns and all of that. There are Google groups. I know there's a Google group for PAs. I think there's a Facebook group for PAs. Usually how it happens is you'll get hired as what's called a day player, which means you're not on for the whole season, but they had a PA call out sick, or it's going to be a crazy shopping day and they need more people to come and carry bags. And so you can respond to these ads. There's also something called Last Looks, which is another Google group, where people often, especially not so much right now because of COVID, but often, if someone wakes up and has the stomach flu, the coordinator will post like, who can be at my shop in 1 hour? And, we'll hire, at that point, you kind of have the luck on your side, because we'll hire anybody for a day. And if you happen to be good, then we'll keep you and we'll keep hiring you back. The hardest thing is getting that first one. But if you get that first call and you go in and you're on time and you're constantly working, you'll be great.
Good advice.
Sounds awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of our previous speakers came through the design world, and she skipped over the PA role, and she said, she spoke about it several times, that it was challenging for her to kind of understand the whole process without having had that step. And while it's probably not the most glamorous thing in the world, at least it builds a foundation so that you can become that much stronger when you move up the ranks.
It's not glamorous, but it is vital. I'm serious. Yeah. It's so funny because everyone's like, costume design. I'm like, guys, my team is like, if you include wardrobe, it's like 25 people often to make these things happen. Because you can't be in all the places at once. I can't personally be in a fitting, a meeting, and go out and go shopping for the character at the same time.
Totally. Yeah.
So you need all of these people, and it can all work beautifully together in this nice seamless team.
Definitely. Well, thanks. PM, I have you next.
Hello. Thank you again for coming and speaking. As many other people have said, I'm definitely on the route of costume design, just because I love the telling of stories and being able to bring those stories to life. So my question is kind of a combination of a lot of the questions that have been asked. I know you talked about taking that PA step, and making sure that you're present and on time. As far as making yourself, I guess, more desirable, would it be helpful to have so my idea of a portfolio is kind of having a reel of short stories that I've designed costumes for or clothing for that is good to have just in case someone wants to see it work, or to also just kind of be ready to showcase what you can do, or is it more so like they just may ask you if you can?
it's never a bad idea to have examples of your work. I mean, you never know who, you might be PAing with and someone goes up and, someone's dad is a producer, or, I mean, you never know who you might be with. So I say absolutely have examples of your work. People may or may not want to see them initially, but if you're working if you have a season-long PAing gig and you talk to your designer like, hey, would you mind taking a look? Absolutely. I cannot think of anybody I know that would say no. Of course they're going to want to look at your work and talk to you about it, and then based on that they can refer you for a costume coordinator position or a shopping position, or whatever it is that you are interested in moving up to for your next role.
Gotcha, thank you. And then one other question. I know you talked about having an agent and things of that nature. Does that, I guess, of course, with the relationship that you have with your agent, do you necessarily tend to go for more elaborate projects for like movies that may, like for example, Fifth Element, that involve a lot more creative and drama-filled costumes, or do you tend to go for more, television, everyday modern clothing?
I go for a good story, and I go for well-written characters. I like diverse stories. I like stories where I'm surprised by people, where they do things that I'm not expecting. Excuse me. And so I've done period things. I've done musicals on Broadway, but I also did The Enemy Within on NBC, which was an FBI procedural with Morris Chestnut, because his character was interesting to me. Jennifer Carpenter, who played kind of the mole, was interesting. So for me, it's mostly about the story and the characters, because it doesn't matter, like, don't get me wrong, a nice 17th century European French piece specifically might be fabulous to design, but if the characters are flat, for me, that's going to be a very hard project. Because whenever I read a script, I'm like, oh, okay, I know who this person is. I know where you shop. I know what, if you like gold, silver, rose gold jewelry, it comes to me as I'm reading the scripts. If that happens, if I'm reading something and I see it in my mind and it's coming alive, that's a project I want to work on.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Great. Caleb, I have you next.
Hi, thank you so much for coming.
Hi.
So I have two. So kind of piggybacking off of that, I guess when you get a script, or I guess I kind of want to know the order of how things happen, because like you say you wanna be able to connect with the character, but when you're trying to get the job, do you normally have a chance to look at the script before you accept the job, or is it kind of like, okay, I got the job and now I just have to make it work with what I have?
I wish I could get jobs without having to read scripts and pitching things. I'm sure there are people who are at that position in their career. I am not. I always get a script and then I go in for an interview. And sometimes it's digitally and over Zoom, and sometimes it's in person. But usually I will get at least one script. Sometimes I get multiple scripts. And from there, I do as much of my design process as I can. So I do world building mood boards. If a director has been hired, I look at what their lookbook and inspiration boards look like to make sure I'm aligning with what they are thinking. And then I get down and I do, if I have time, I'll do sketches for characters. I'll go swatch and have fabrications. I want it to be as fleshed out and real for the people who are looking to hire me as possible. Because if I can make them see it my way, then I hope it'll be harder for them to see it somebody else's. So yes, I always have one script. Oftentimes I will have more than one script to go on. So that way I know the arc that a character is going to take over a season, and I can talk about that in the meeting, even if I don't have, every single design worked out for them. I can have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and talk about how they transition to those places.
Thank you so much. That is very helpful, actually. And then I have one more. So, what do you wish someone would have told you before getting into costume design?
I wish that I had known earlier that it is harder to work your way up in theater than it is in film and television. It's not that you cannot do it, but working in theater, the way that most of the people I know have done it is they assisted more established designers while also trying to do their own work at smaller theaters or regional theaters. And it leads to exhaustion, and there's not enough time in the day. At least there wasn't for me. And you work your way up and you become an assistant or an associate designer. But then oftentimes you will stay an associate designer for your entire career. And there are some people who absolutely love that. And there are some people who did not want to do that. And that was the case for me. In film and television, I feel that there are more projects and there is more of a chance for you to be able to move up, and for someone you have worked with to say, like, you should hire this person, and their word gets you in and gets you the interview, and from there it's on you. But it felt like there were more possibilities for me in film and television to be able to do my own work.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.
Azat, I have you next.
Yes, hi. Thank you for coming today. Yes, I'm Azad. Actually, I have two questions for today. First one is like every designer, like fashion designers, usually like students or like experience, they have some designer in their mind. They're trying to get that point, right? Like a famous designer or something. Are there in the costume designs where somebody you're always trying to get that like more experience or more famous to get that point? And second question is, are you ever about to use your like all experience, that huge researches you've done, and create your own collection? Like, I'm sure it's gonna be like crazy nice and perfect collection for fashion shows. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. For the first question, I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Are you asking about other costume designers who I think are at the pinnacle of their career? And okay, Colleen Atwood is an amazing designer. She often works with Tim Burton and has done some of the most breathtakingly beautiful clothes. Eiko Ishioka, whom I actually had the pleasure of working with on Broadway. She did Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, and I was one of her assistants on that. I mean, her work in Bram Stoker's Dracula is breathtaking to me. More recently, Michelle Clapton, who is most famous for all of the Game of Thrones series, her attention to detail. They just recently published a book with all of her costumes in it, and you can see all of the tiny details, and her world building was amazing to me. You always knew where you were in a very complex and complicated story based on clothing and hair, which is very impressive. As far as having my own collection, to me, the things that I design are so specific to a character or a show that it would be hard for me to see them stand alone, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Up next, I see Ariana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you're all good.
Okay, there's like a really loud heater in the room, so I apologize if there's feedback. But I want to say thank you so much for sharing like your story. I feel like I really related to it because I came from a science background and my first introduction to anything was the costume shop, and costume design my senior year of college like changed my life. It's why I'm here. And I'm curious if, at least in the beginning of your career, if you ever used that background, which seems maybe unrelated to your advantage, or if there's any way that you incorporated that, those skills.
There is no skill that you have that is not pertinent to costume design. It's seriously, anybody who has asked me like, what should I study? I'm like, whatever interests you, because it will always matter. I think that the analytical side of my brain that is so used in the sciences and in research, specifically the questions, really helped with breaking down scripts, being able to go through and be able to organize the thoughts of like, this happens here, I wonder what's going to happen here, and begin to understand and analyze that in a visual way. But for an example, as far as things that you can study and how they might relate, my freshman year in college, we all had to take a freshman seminar, and none of them were pertinent to any kind of major. It was all things, you couldn't take anything that was. And so I took a history of the Cold War class. There were 7 men and me. I'm still convinced to this day that my professor was an ex-CIA agent, just based on the information that he had in this class. And it was fascinating. And I took it and I had my notes. And then the first design job that I got that was truly mine is a show about Cold War spies and talking about Khrushchev and all of these things that I had gone through and learned in class. And so it was something that, it was knowledge that I had no idea I would need again, but there it was. So yes, you can absolutely go through, and I don't know what part of the sciences you were interested in, but any kind of anatomical drawings, obviously, if you're in biology, anything natural can come into prints, can come into your organic, if you are looking for research and organic shapes, amoebas, fractals. These are things that are definitely interesting and repeating patterns, and can absolutely influence you.
So encouraging to hear. I feel like people always ask me like, how are you going to connect these two things? They're so different. I'm like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. But yeah, I feel like there are things and ways that they connect. Yeah.
And sometimes you can't even put it into words, and that's fine. Sometimes when I'm starting a project, if I have a little bit of time, I go through and I just do an image search. I loved the picture collection at the Mid-Manhattan Library. That's not a thing right now, but just going, and I wasn't specifically looking for costume or clothing related things, but just anything that felt right, I would pull. And I wouldn't judge myself. I would just be like, yes. And there was a yes pile and a no pile, and I didn't get to second guess. I didn't go back through. And then I would get home and I would look at all of these things that had been in my yes pile. And all of a sudden things started to come together, whether it was a color palette, whether it was just everything was a geometric shape and there were no organic, curvy lines in things. And so then I'm like, okay, so based on this, how does this begin to transfer into what I'm doing? So it's not always important that you can put into words how it connects, but as long as you can begin to connect the dots for yourself, that's the most important thing.
That's great.
Totally. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Allison, I have you next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. You're all good.
Okay, cool. Do you ever find yourself getting in like a design rut? Like do you like gravitate towards like a specific era's aesthetic? Because I do that, and like as a designer I can like dictate which what inspires the specific dress or whatever, but since you're given a script, they essentially tell you what it should be. So I don't know. I don't really know what I lost my train of thought, sorry. So how do you make sure that you like stay on course rather than like meander through? Like I know you can justify and be like, oh, they're like a romantic soul, so they actually wear it this way, but like how do you like find the balance between those two things?
As you say, I have the story written for me, and oftentimes the context of it is dictated by the script, by what the production designer and I have chosen to do. If something is going to have a more 70s influence, even if it's modern day, and the DP is going to shoot it more that way. So I do have those parameters. What keeps me in check are my director and my producers who have to sign off on everything.
Okay.
So, I'll never forget, like, bow ties. On The Americans, I tried to put bow ties on people more than once. And there were something, we had congressional people, and I'm like, there are absolutely people in Congress who wear bow ties. And no, I could get them on wait staff, obviously. But like there was one time in one of the later seasons where one of the male lead characters was having a suit made, and he was at a very high end, haberdashery, and the tailor was, beautiful suit, custom bow tie got nixed, and you're just like, okay, there are no bow ties in the show. I understand. So it's that, that kind of keeps you in. The showrunner is the person who sees everything, all of the elements before you necessarily do, and they're kind of the gatekeepers for the visuals for the show. The thing I will say, though, is, like I'm sure fashion design, we do get pigeonholed as far as what work we do. My TV shows are all spy-based. So if you have a spy-based show, I'm your girl. But that doesn't mean, obviously, that I can't do, a period drama or things. But people begin to think of you and like, oh, no, this is what you do. This is your work. And so sometimes it's tough navigating out of the way that other people think of you.
Okay, that was very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad I could answer it.
Katie, I have a couple more hands up. I don't know if you have a hard stop. Are you?
I do not. I just, hold on one second, because my crew was actually texting me. So I just want to make sure that we're okay. But okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Hi. All good. Sorry.
Okay. Monica, I have you next.
Hi.
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 So this semester we've been talking a lot about sustainability in the fashion industry, and I was just wondering, how does that look like in the costume design area?
It varies from project to project. Obviously, period shows, you use a lot of vintage clothes, which is a lot of reusing. Even on modern dress shows, I like to shop thrift and consignment, because, as we were talking about earlier, the clothes already look like they've been worn. I don't have to then go through a process of breaking down clothing again to make it look like it's been in someone's closet. So there is somewhat of an inherent nature of reusing and recycling there. I know there has been a much bigger push with a lot of the studios to begin to do things in a greener way. One of the main ways is paperwork, because there are some things that we can't control. For example, if I need to build those 8 silk jumpsuits, I need to build the 8 silk jumpsuits. What I can control is the reams of paper that come out every day with script updates and things. So there is another great program that just came out about 3 years ago, I think, that is all based on your tablet, and it's a script program. And so whenever you get an update, it just automatically updates your script and also allows you to transfer your notes from the previous script to the new one, which is the key. So you're not having to transcribe everything.
Yeah.
So there's the biggest ones I've seen are, again, in the paper and also in water. Everybody needs water on set, and the number of times you would find the half-drunk water bottles lying around and no one could remember whose was whose. So a lot of productions now, at the very beginning, give you the production swag of a water bottle with your name and the show on it. And so then you can go to the water cooler and get your own water. And those are the 2 biggest ways that I have seen productions addressing the environment and the environmental impact of shooting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go to there's two people who haven't spoken yet. Dylan, I have you next, and then we'll go back to some repeat questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Yep.
Okay, I actually have two questions. So I know you said sometimes that you can have a really big crew behind costume design, and then sometimes you have a really small one. So after you get the job and you're already like pitching together on, you know, outfits for things, would you say that you're the main one who's pitching the outfits, or would you guys all work together as a team to come up with those, or how does it work?
No, it is my design. I am the one who comes up creatively with all of the ideas and pitches them. The assistant designer works with me on the background. And so if I've established a color palette and I say that this is the color palette that all of my leading characters are in, so for the scenes that they're in, no background needs to be in these colors. She or he is in charge of making sure that that happens. They are in charge of the research often for the background, but the principals and the day players all stay with me.
Okay, and my second question is, since you've worked on film and TV, which would you say is the biggest difference between the two, and which one do you prefer?
The speed that you do things at. Film, you can have months to prep, and you only have one story. TV, the most I've ever had to prep on TV was 6 weeks before the start of a season.
Wow.
And oftentimes I have been doing it, and even at the end of the 6 weeks, I only have the first 2 scripts. So sometimes you'll get a script 1 week before you start shooting it. And so then it's doing all of the paperwork that you have to do to be ready for all the meetings to then, you know, you understand. I actually, and this would have surprised me if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I prefer television. And the reason is that I get to live with the characters longer. I get to see the changes that they do, and I get more time to work with them. I also feel like right now there is so much interesting work happening, and there's a lot of potential for a very diverse group of stories to be told. And I feel like the money and the people that are pushing behind that are more in television than in film.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Daria, I have you next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Great. Hi. I know you've touched on this earlier, but is there a big difference in how you approach designing for like theater and the stage versus TV and film? And specifically, like I'm interested in like technical design, pattern making. So what are some like construction details that you have to take into account for one or the other, or what are some similarities between all of them?
Sure. I mean, it's the same skill set between all three. You know, knowing how to drape, how to flat pattern is useful for all of them. The biggest difference is scale in both size of clothing and also in pattern. I did a Faust for an opera, and it wasn't a huge house, but it was a fairly good sized house. And I had a very large black with a red window pane fabric for my devil at one point. And it was beautiful, and I loved it. And I thought it was the most garish thing I had ever seen until I went to the 16th row and I couldn't see it. And then we went over it and we stitched over it in embroidery thread to try and outline it. And I went to the 20th row and I couldn't see it. And then we got red paint out and began painting it. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen costumes from the Metropolitan Opera up close, but if you look at them up close, you're like, how in the world does it look like this? And then you stand back in the house and it's the glorious thing that you see. So it's all about scale. It's not that you are going to be building anything any differently necessarily. Quick changes accepted. But it's about what you're showing and what you need the audience to be able to see.
Anna, did you have another question?
Yeah, I mean, we've all asked so many different questions. It got a little bit answered, but yeah. So basically, as far as all the guilds go and the groups and the pages, it always seems like a little bit of a labyrinth to me. How do you, when applying to those, are you just looking to answer ads, or would you be submitting a resume somewhere? I guess it'll probably differ from job to job, but it's more about just like, how do I get into that?
For a PA, it's honestly usually answering an ad. It's either that, or you have a friend who's already PAing who is going to go and visit their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their grandmother and is going to take Friday off, and they just automatically replace themselves with you. I don't know that I've ever looked at a resume for a PA. For shoppers, for coordinators, absolutely, and from any position thereof. Does that answer what you're looking for?
For sure. Yeah, I'm in a position where I'm in like the Midwest, the not most desirable area for film, but it is the area I want to go into. So just physically being there. I love it. I'm here, but
there's shooting that's happening there. So
yeah,
all good.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Amber, how about you? Did you have another question?
Yeah, I had another question. Can you see and hear me fine?
Yep, you're good.
All right, yeah, I just had another quick question. It was just a general question. What do you see for like the future of costume design, specifically where I know that with the pandemic, in fashion design, people are sort of like trying to spend their money more wisely, and people have been getting into sustainability and sometimes even minimalism, wearing things that can be worn multiple times. So, and another thing is that people now want more well-made stuff, the stuff that they like, that means a lot to them. So I wanted to know how like that, this whole pandemic, and like what would you see for the future of costume design? And also if you see like costume design as like, it could be marketable in the same way as fashion in the future. Like, I'm not sure if like actual designers would start, like actual designers would start marketing costume design like items, you know, just like how you'd go to a Halloween store and get a costume from there, but usually they're not as popular nowadays. I know people do commissions for costumes, like I know, you know, cosplayers do that. So I want to know how you'd see, like, if you were to see that come into play in the future. I know it's a long question, but yeah.
No, I'll try. The thing I can say is that shooting in the pandemic is massively more expensive.
Right.
Because of, I mean, even if you just stopped at the PPE and the testing for the crew and the cast. And so the production I was on was already established before we started. So I have not had to budget anything or deal with getting more crew or any kind of new thing yet. So I don't know that I'm able to actually accurately answer how it's going to change. My guess is that mostly we will be working remotely as much as possible. So I see a lot of prep at home. I see, you know, going in and not being able to have everybody in fittings, being able to have the designer and the actor, and then the designer goes out so that way the tailor can come in. Like, I see those kind of logistical things being issues. Once everybody has been vaccinated and it is, you know, no worse than a common cold, I hate to say it, but I think everything's just going to go back to the way it was. I don't see it changing long term, honestly. And as to your second question,
yeah, it was about like the way like clothing in general is like distributed, like how they would market stuff. Because I know fashion design is very like, it's not mass manufactured, but usually it's more accessible to the average person. I mean, mostly at the fast fashion level, but even at high end, most people can buy it. But I wanted to know if I guess costumes will become the mainstream, because now with like I guess the evolution of Gen Z, and like I guess people just want to express themselves through their appearance more. I guess that's just from what I'm seeing through social media. I feel like I wanted to know what was your opinion on if in the future, like costumes will become something that is like accessible to everyone, not something that you would just make 3 days before Halloween or something like that.
I think it's quite possible. Jamie Bryant, who is the costume designer for Mad Men, did a collaboration with Banana Republic, and they had like the Mad Men capsule collection. There haven't been a ton of those, but I definitely think that if there's a show that hits the zeitgeist just right, that there absolutely could be more of those. So it's not necessarily the costumes themselves, but it's clothing inspired by, shall we say. Something else I know that has been going on is the Costume Industry Coalition, which is a group of all of the costume houses and beaters and dyers and all of like those people who work to make costumes for film and television and Broadway. They recently did a fundraiser selling the pattern for one of the Spencer jackets from Hamilton.
Wow.
And it was huge for them. So I think that being able possibly to market your own costume pattern, you know, for Halloween as a starting point, you know, your Elsa dress, your whatever it is. I think absolutely. From there, I'd be interested to see, because there have been fashion designers who have done theater. I mean, Isaac Mizrahi is one that comes to mind immediately. And he's done a fair amount of dance, actually. But as far as it kind of blending into what we think of as everyday ready to wear, I'd be really interested to see that, because you're right. Everybody is expressing themselves in a far more freeing and less gender assigned and societally moderated way. Really, really interesting. And so I would love personally to see it, but I'll be really interested if it actually happens.
Yeah, that's something that I'm really strongly like supportive of. Like I've been trying to get into historical costuming. I'm kind of working on like a corset right now from 1898. And like I just feel like it's something that I would want to wear, depending on who has a preference of wearing corsets often. But literally anything, like even like a walking skirt from the late 1890s, like anyone could wear that in the winter. So it's just definitely something interesting. So thank you for answering.
Of course, I hope I was able to answer.
Yeah, you were. Yeah, thank you so much.
Philip, did you have another question?
Yes, just to kind of go back on a few things. I know you talked about Google groups and Facebook groups. I think you mentioned something about last looks. And were there any other like specific things to start off with that like website like that?
That is the one that comes to my mind most. What I can do though is after this, I will consult with a couple of people I know, and Caroline, if it's okay, I can email you what those are. And then she can send them out, because as I said, I haven't been hiring crew in a little bit. And so I'm not always, you know, they come and go so quickly sometimes that I'm not honestly up on what is the most useful one right now.
That'd be perfect if you could do that. Thank you.
And then second part of that, because, you know, it is a time of a pandemic and with the way that the economy is, what is a good, as a PA, what is a good expected going rate? Just so I know, like if I am relocating to wherever, I know what I can expect, how long I need to, you know, budget, this, that, and the third before things start to pick up.
Of course. In New York, it is minimum wage, so it's $15 an hour. It is something that every designer I know tries to throw in as many perks as we can, because we feel that it is too low for the work that the PAs do. So there is always food, meaning like lunch is always provided, but also at the end of the day, I'm like, you want to take some home? You want something? Breakfast on set is another thing. So sometimes, you know, we're trying to feed you as many as 3 meals a day. The other thing is, and this is completely off the record and you did not hear it from me, but we usually have 1 and sometimes 2 production vehicles that are to us. So if you take the easy pass out of the windshield and you do not get a speeding or parking ticket over the weekend, I don't know if you drove to go see your grandmother or, you know, whatever you might be doing with it.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So we try and throw in perks for the job because it is hard. I'm not going to lie. It's a hard job and it is not paid commensurate to the worth of the job or, the talent, honestly, that is in the job usually. And so we do try our best to make it a little bit easier on people.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Simone Robinson. Did you have another question? And I'm just posting the survey for you guys too in the chat.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So I know you mentioned like having to work with like the showrunner, the producers, and the writers. Like, do you ever find it frustrating having to like check in with them and make sure that you're on track? Or do you think it actually is like it helps your creative process to like have someone to bounce your ideas off of?
It depends on the show,
Okay.
is the short answer.
Mm-hmm.
I have worked on shows that were lovely, and I really only had to get one person to sign off on things. Meaning, like, I would send it to a big, long group of people, but there was only one person's opinion that really mattered, and that was the person where the buck stopped. There have been other shows where I had to get, and I'm not kidding, 12 different people's opinions and to sign off on. In general, network television is the hardest to get people to sign off on things, and is more designed by committee than cable, even basic cable or the streaming services. So usually it's all fine because I am not going to show anybody an option that I am not happy with appearing on camera. That would just not be a smart move on my part. I guarantee you they will pick the one you hate if you show them one that you hate. And so in doing it, if someone has one look, I give them 4 or 5 options to choose from. And sometimes if I'm going through a fitting and it's only 2 suits that fit, it's 2 suits. But here's one with a different shirt and tie combo. Here's one where there's no tie and it's a little more relaxed. Because the thing that has remained shocking to me is people that should be able to see things, meaning like, here is a suit. You can imagine how it looks without the shirt, without the jacket on, with the sleeves rolled up. They cannot see it unless you actually show it to them.
Wow.
So, giving them those options. But can it be frustrating? Absolutely. Do you sometimes yell about the taste level of the people that are your gatekeepers? Yes, you do. But then you remember that you have a job and that you love what you do, and you just keep on doing
Roll
it.
with it.
Exactly.
Great. Last
Thank
question
You're welcome.
is with Dylan Lawson. Sorry, I'm talking over you guys.
Okay, so I know you said earlier that sometimes, like, you're not, like, once you send the costumes off to the wardrobe department, like, sometimes you're not even sure, like, which outfit is being worn in each scene. So how do you, like, you plan for each scene, right? But then, like, you're not sure if it's going to be shot, or, like, what exactly did you mean by that?
No, I'm sorry if I confused you. No, what I meant is that I'm not the one who pulls the clothes for the next day. So I have a rack in the costume shop, and on the rack are all of the garment bags for all of the episode shows. Each garment bag is labeled with the character name and all of that, as well as the scene number that they wear it for, and all of my color-coded Post-its on it. Then all of those go to the wardrobe truck, and it's the wardrobe team's job to say, okay, we're shooting scene 17. We need to go find Dan's costume. So they go and find Dan, they find scene 17, and they pull it out and make sure that he's wearing the correct thing. Yes, I do know what everybody is wearing for each scene.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
You.
Sorry for the confusion.
Katie, this has been absolutely amazing. As you can obviously tell from all the questions, everyone has been very riveted. So we really, really appreciate you being here today and taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you guys for having awesome questions.
Anytime. Students, I haven't put in the chat room our survey for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too.